Welcome to EFT Nation, your home for all things tapping. For show notes and resources, please visit EFTtappingtraining.com. We are your tapping hosts. I'm Alina Frank.
And I'm Craig Weiner. The information provided in this podcast is not a substitute for counseling or medical advice. The information presented here is meant to inspire and educate listeners, but are not guarantees of any kind.
Welcome, everyone, to EFT Nation. I'm Alina Frank.
And I'm Craig Weiner.
And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Regine Montestheme, who is here talking about something that's very important that's happening in our culture right now. And but before we get into that, Regine, can you please introduce yourself and your background?
Sure. My name is Regine Montestheme, and I am actually an attorney by trade. And a few years ago, I decided that I wanted to be in line with my passion, which is about self-development, self-growth. And I created a retreat business helping Black women in particular get away from their crazy lives and have a place for self-care and nurturing. And so I created Black Butterfly Journeys. And then I decided I wanted to continue to expand and learn. And I discovered tapping a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was just really interesting. So I took a course with Alina and Craig and became, got a certificate for level 2. And I love tapping. I just found that it's just revolutionary for myself personally and for everyone I've shared it with.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. And right now, I have to imagine that your life is filled with more than just retreat business.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Number one, obviously for COVID-19 kind of reasons, but more importantly with what's happening right now societally. And yeah. I know right now, having been following you, that you're playing an important role in speaking out in the issues of racial injustice and what's happening right now throughout not just the United States, but the world. And it's about time. And so that's what we really wanted to talk about, because it's having a lot of impact. It's traumatizing people. It's bringing up and triggering people across the color scale. And we wanted to spend some time talking to you about it because you have a lot of experience educating people about this.
And I also want to bring in the idea that it's particularly hard for those of us that have thought, oh, we're woke, like, yeah, okay.
I'm no racist, so this is really important for those other people to be listening to and paying attention to, and that's really a pretty strong communication that's happening out there.
Right. And one of the things that I love about EFT is that if you do it well, your shadow crap will come up. It is gonna come up. Yeah. And there's no spiritual bypassing. And so I would love to hear from you about what your experience has been in this time and what you're out there offering or telling people.
Yeah, so thanks for that. So I think it's a host of issues, but really what I love about this particular, I wouldn't call it a breakdown, but a break open moment for us in the States is that the conversation, I think for the first time, I'm almost 50, and I know a little bit about history, but it seems to me for the first time, non-Blacks, non-people of color, white people are really being challenged to look at themselves with respect to how their role passively or non-passively is contributing to this whole race issue. And it seems to me that white people are more open to having that conversation than they ever had before. And so from my perspective, I think it's important for sure to educate people of color, and for my community, I'm using tapping to help my women transition from the anger and the pain and the frustration into really letting that stuff out in a productive way, in a constructive way. And I think tapping is great for that. But also for the bigger picture of how now can we educate non-Blacks and help them transition because this is a we're all in it together situation. And so if I can play a role in educating non-Blacks more in terms of what anti-racism is, in terms of how white privilege has really been such a guiding force to racism and the construct of racism in this country, both from kind of an intellectual historical perspective, but also from a spiritual perspective, how, you know, we can move past the guilt, the shame, the defensiveness, all of the kind of things that I'm sure, you know, white people are going through, and just part of the human experience, right? So if we can, if I can support that and participate in that and provide resources in a way that I'm really, you know, of course I'm angry, and of course I feel like, you know, I want to shame every white person in this country, right? But that's not helpful. So how can I be a source of love and light and say, hey, this is not about any of that. This is about, this is what it is now. How can we move forward? And you know, start to dismantle racism from the foundation.
Yeah, I loved your term, the not just the breakdown, but the break open time.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll speak for myself, but I'm seeing this on social media and in conversations, is, you know, terms like white fragility and those kinds of things were almost like politically correct terms, but there's like a willingness that I'm starting to witness from other white friends, just because that's what I'm speaking to, is to look deeper now. And more of a, what was I not feeling? What was I not allowing myself to know? Where was I not willing to dig deeper to experience or to feel? And so I think on both sides, I'm really finding a lot of fascinating, maybe new emotions, like even on my experience on the Black side where the anger justified, et cetera. But now there's pressure to be actually seen and heard, like your voice actually matters, and the pressure to either be vulnerable or to be an expert at, and all these expectations now where I wasn't paid attention to and I wasn't heard. So there's new feelings of vulnerability there. And on the white side, it's like, okay, what's it going to take to go into the shadow, feel that, to make a difference? And then do I communicate about it? Does that make me egotistically like I'm woke? I want to communicate and share, but does that mean that I'm trying to prove some? So there's this unknowing.
Yeah.
A lot of, how do we do this?
Yeah, and a fear of saying the wrong thing.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, we are navigating on completely new territory here. So I don't think anyone has Martin Luther King probably didn't have the blueprint for this right now. You know, we don't have a blueprint for how to navigate these emotions. That's why it's so wonderful for you as spiritual leaders, as I think you are, to help your community move through it with as much grace and love and non-judgment and acceptance as possible, because we got to figure this out. Like, what do you do with the range of emotions that you just identified, right? Like, how do I deal with that? Plus, I have all this other crap I have to deal with. And COVID is still a pandemic, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic about how in the middle of activism and lack of social distancing, prioritization of, that's a whole nother conversation.
I think that's what's touched so many people is that, so not only did COVID just bring to light all of the inequities in our communities and how and how it's affecting minorities in many ways, not only in illness and death rate, but also unemployment rates, right? And
economics and healthcare.
And in spite of all that, people are out on the street saying, I'll risk my life for this. So that's what's touched us really deeply.
Yeah, really.
So from a perspective, so I just want to address, we have different audience members, right? Some of them, let's just say, are people that are doing EFT with others. So whether they're social workers or they're psychologists or they're practitioners on whatever level, what are some of your thoughts? I mean, we know we should always be holding as a practitioner a non-judgmental space, a safe place, all of those things. But I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share for practitioners to maybe open their eyes to your perspective that might be useful for what they're holding open to, or what they might be aware of, or what just I'm just kind of curious your thoughts. If you had a large audience of practitioners that are holding space for both people of color, Black, white, that are dealing with these issues right now, what might you say to them if you had that opportunity? Since you
that's a great question. I mean, I think for the practitioners, number one is to self-educate, right? Like, you have to really understand what the practical issues are, what are the social issues, what does white fragility or white privilege really mean, and how does it impact someone's psychosocial experience, their social experience from an objective perspective, and also understand that I would imagine, I'm putting myself in white shoes. So also understanding that, the way you live is the way you live in your perspective and your view of the world. And so, how do you hold space for that, at the same time be very sensitive to that the way that you have viewed the world has caused real pain and suffering, not because you did anything in particular, but that's just the socioeconomic nature of racism. So the way that I am in the world has caused pain and suffering to an entire group of people on this planet. And so how do I kind of deal with that internally while holding space for someone who may be a racist, who may in their very bones say, I don't like Black people, or people that don't look like me, or who may be in denial about being a racist, or who may say, I've never seen race, I'm colorblind. Okay, well, what does that mean? Right? I think we hear a lot of that.
Right.
I was taught just to love everybody, so I don't see race. Well, that's racist. And so, as the practitioner, you have to I think, as a really good practitioner, you have to understand that all of those perspectives, and then maybe, distance yourself from that so that you can hold space for the person who's bringing up all this stuff that I know that you, as white people, were not raised to deal with, and we're not raised to kind of to handle. And so, it's easier for me to have a conversation about race because I deal with race every day.
Right.
And kind of what that means. And so I think the practitioners have to step into a really huge role. Right. And then not judging, right? What if someone is a racist? Like, they may be saying some vile things.
Right.
So you can't judge that. We have to help them process and heal in a way that's constructive.
We've talked about like political bubbles that we all live in, and I was touched the other day. There was a local community forum in which somebody of color was moving to the area and asking, what's your experience of living? I was devastated.
Yeah.
I was feeling, here we are in a fairly safe, non-judgmental, open-minded, liberal community. And I expected a certain expectation of course, there were unique experiences. I was dumbfounded by the plethora of negative experiences in our community by people of color who were commenting. And it broke me. I was like, that's my community, but that's not what I experienced. I don't see that. And so that which I don't know, right? And I was going to say, so we may be dealing with clients that are going through a lot of stress right now, but racist is not like an individual. It's like when we keep it to an individual, it's not me, but I'm part of a racist community culture paradigm that is causing this pain. And how do I take responsibility? And there's that defensiveness about it. It's not me, it should be. I mean, all these lines we draw, there shouldn't be violence. I can understand protesting, but not this. And it's causing all this stuff to be coming up for people. And it might be showing up as headaches or stress or, any number of ways that it's showing up as stressing their health or their environment or their family or whatever right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think there is an opportunity for us to do better. Because I wrote somewhere like, okay, I think I'm going to do a book and tapping group on how to be an anti-racist. And someone commented like, well, all of my groups and all of my sessions are like, I don't see, like you said, colorblind, I don't discriminate against anyone. And I just think we can all do much better and not feel overwhelmed like I've got to go out and save the entire country, but what can I do right now to make things better? And I sat here last week and I thought, we ran a conference, the Northwest Tappers Gathering, and did we ever have a person of color in the 8 years that we ran it?
You know what? It's so low. And I mean, it's crazy.
I think that I don't think we
did. And the tapping community is so devoid of color.
Yes.
And it's interesting because I've never seen an intentional, like I've never witnessed something purposeful, and that's a really good example.
Yeah.
I've never seen within the field a statement or a way of phrasing, please white people only here, or something like that. And yet I'm in the ESEP organization, and there's now, on inclusion, et cetera, integration and inclusion, et cetera. And it's like, how are we stating this, that's not showing up where people are not feeling invited or comfortable?
Right.
Where we have to dig deeper, I think.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, when I took your course, I was the only Black person in the audience, and that's typical, right? I expect that, and I didn't feel like, oh my God, I'm the only person, and I didn't have any of those, but it's certainly, I notice it. I know that, right? And I know that tapping is devoid of, there's just a handful. I think Nick Ortner did a post or something, and he had a Black psychologist who's on there, who's on his summits, and so he did one tapping session addressing racial issues. Hey, it's better than nothing, I suppose. But something like tapping, which is an amazing methodology. I mean, imagine if we could use tapping not just to help. Like I said, I use it with my community, and, I have a limited knowledge of tapping, but I use it with my community to help deal with this range of people. I spent, when George Floyd's murder happened, I cried for 2 weeks every day, nonstop.
Yeah.
And that's how most of my friends and family, everyone felt the same way.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I'm home. I don't have to go into a job, but I have a cousin who said, and I'm supposed to now put on my plastic smile and go to work. Like, how am I supposed to do that? Feeling so much rage and anger and sadness. And so, it would be beautiful if the EFT community, of course, tapping is for everyone, but really made an asserted effort to educate, expose, invite people of color to I call it the miracle drug. I'm like, this is, you just do tapping because it's so quick and it's so accessible, so I just think that, we can all, like you were saying, Elena, we all need to do better.
So we're always open to feedback. A colleague of ours, Victor Lee Lewis, has an organization. It's wonderful because they just invited like the whole board of the Energy Psychology Board to participate in a retreat. So I'm seeing movement, but there still needs to be invitation, like what steps can be done. And that's not just for this conversation, to actually, it needs to be an active reach out, not just while they're not showing up.
Right.
That's not my fault.
Right. Exactly.
And so, so we are absolutely open to continuing that communication and collaboration with you. I also had one other thought that was interesting as you were saying that is, as you're talking about how do I go back in the world? How do I interact? One of the things about EFT that people perceive is, well, in a way, I'm tapping away or releasing my negative emotions. Okay. I can really imagine right now somebody going, why would I want to do that?
Yes.
Why would I want to release my anger right now? Why would I want to get rid of my?
I need that anger. Yeah. If I let go of that anger, then they win.
Right.
Or some variation, or it'll lose momentum, or change won't happen again, or etc. So I could see this being a real issue for.
Yeah. What? Speak to that. I'd like to hear.
Yeah. So what I've done is say that, you know, we want the energy of the anger. We just don't want the anger, because that's what's going to chip away and harden us, and it causes all sorts of diseases. We know that. Science is clear, right? And so how do you transmute the anger from anger energy into passion and fire, right? Like Martin Luther King was one of the most effective leaders of our time, and was able to change the world using the most powerful force, right? Love and forgiveness. And so we have models. So, you know, I think we know, at least intellectually, that anger is not going to serve us in the long term. But yeah, emotionally, I feel like, you know, so I think that's part of the whole tapping education. And when I'm having that conversation, I'm always bringing up Martin Luther King. I'm always bringing up Nelson Mandela, you know, because these two men have told us anger is not the way. We can still effectuate change using much more powerful and effective forces. So that's how I.
That's great. That's great. Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming here. And I want to stress, this isn't a one and done, folks.
Yeah.
This is not a one and done. This is not put something out there and next week you go back to your regular lives. It just can't. We have to really take this up for our lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we have, because another advantage right now is the media now is providing lots of opportunities for education, learning, resources, experiences. So perhaps there's a way that you have a link or somewhere.
Well, we can actually put it in the show notes.
That's what I was going to say.
All of the resources you've provided.
Yes, absolutely. I have books, I have movies, I have, you know, articles, videos.
I've already been sharing. I've been working my way through, and every one is powerful and insightful.
Yeah.
So, Regine, how can people get in touch with you?
So they can email me at regine@blackbutterflyjourneys.com. And if you have any questions, I've been talking to other groups of, you know, with white people and helping them kind of process. And so I'm happy to play that role if that's what God is leading me to do. I'm happy to do that. And whatever I can do, because this is the issue of our time. COVID and this issue has not happened by coincidence. So we have to.
And I want to thank you, because I know that it was actually courageous of you to reach out to us personally.
Absolutely.
That isn't something that's comfortable.
No.
Yes,
and I don't want to say calling us out, but the way that you actually reached out was very powerful and very appreciated. And if you hadn't done it, it wouldn't have resulted in this happening. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. My pleasure. And thank you for being so receptive and for being so responsive. Appreciate that.
Regine, aside from your email, is there a website or a Facebook page where people can find you?
So Regine Monesteem on my Facebook page, or Black Butterfly Journeys on Facebook. Either way, I'm there. Yeah.
Great. We'll be sure to add that in the show notes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was great.
Thanks, Regine.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today at EFT Nation. And remember that you can find show notes and previous episode at EFTtappingtraining.com.